It is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and Danielle Allentuck here to recap a frustrating, gut-wrenching, disappointing, devastating end to the Orioles season at the hands of the Kansas City Royals, being swept in 2 games in the American League Wild Card Series. We're going to dive into exactly what went wrong in the series, what went wrong in the second half of the season, what led the Orioles to this place, and take a brief look ahead to the offseason. I know it's early to be thinking that far ahead, but you have to when your season ends in such tragic fashion. And Danielle, what a brutal way to go out. The Orioles pitchers over 2 games allowed just 3 runs, but their offense just had 1 run to their name. They lose
Yeah.
1-0 in game 1 and 2-1 in game 2. And I don't know if I've seen the bats go this quiet at such a horrible time.
Yeah. I mean, it was honestly a really gutsy pitching manager game from Brandon Hyde. I mean, the way he took Zach Eflin out after 4 innings and managed a bullpen like that, and for them to come out and only allow 2 runs today, and the offense should have been fine. These guys are talented guys. They have Anthony Santander, one of the best home run hitters. They have 3 former top prospects in that dugout. So it was just the bats went dead, just like they have all the second half. You thought they had some hope with how they played last week, but not a single drop of that carried over to the series.
No, and you saw it start in game 1 when Corbin Burnes throws 8+ innings, allows just 5 hits and 1 earned run, and dominates the Royals lineup from top to bottom. The only blemish was when he walked the 9 hitter who has got 37 stolen bases and Michael Garcia. He advances to second with a stolen base. He advances to third on a ground out, and Bobby Witt Jr., the American League and Major League leader in batting average, scores him on a base hit. That was the only blemish of the entire game. And to watch Corbin Burnes dominate in what could be his final outing as an Oriole was incredibly frustrating. This was exactly what the Orioles acquired him to do, is to start the most important games of the season, and he absolutely delivered, and the Orioles simply wasted that outing.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the best starts of his career from a guy who's had incredible starts basically his entire career. So they absolutely wasted that. He's a guy, you need an ace like that to lead you deep into the postseason. They had that, and it's honestly kind of a shame that the Orioles offense couldn't take advantage of that at all. Now we know that may not know if Corbin Burnes is going to be back next year. You kind of have to expect that he's not, because we have no track record from the Orioles of them being willing to pay a guy like that. And yes, there is new ownership, and we'll see how this offseason plays out. But Corbin Burnes is going to be one of the top free agents this offseason. He's going to be getting a contract over $200 million. So I just don't see a way the Orioles are going to be paid that back. They had this one chance this year to take advantage of having an ace, and they did not take advantage of it at all.
And I know Orioles fans want to be optimistic about the Orioles' chances. And Corbin Burnes was asked after the game if all things were equal, would he want to stay in Baltimore? And he said he's not even thinking about it yet, and he shouldn't be. I mean, he has a ways to go, about a month before he really truly hits free agency, and then he's out of the Orioles' hands. They have lost the advantage of having the opportunity to extend him. He's no longer going to be in the building anymore from now on, and so they have not handed out a contract of $200 million ever. The biggest they've ever handed out was Chris Davis, $161 million, and there is just no precedent yet to them doing that. That doesn't mean it's not possible, but he is available to the open market. And so he is going to be taking offers from anybody who is willing to pay him that kind of money, the kind of money that he thinks he deserves, as he should be. And it's a shame, because that was the deepest an Orioles pitcher has ever pitched in a playoff game since 1997 ALCS Mike Messina. He's also the first starter to throw a pitch in the 9th inning of a playoff game since 2019 Steven Strasburg, who won the World Series MVP for the Nationals that year. And the Orioles bats, I mean, of the 10 hardest hit balls in that game, they had one of them. And that was Jordan Westberg's near home run, which was taken away by the Great Wall of Baltimore. According to StatCast, would have been a home run in 28 of 30 ballparks. Oriole Park at Camden Yards was one of those. They went 1 for 7 with runners in scoring position. They had no rhythm offensively. And as we know with this Orioles team, when they don't hit home runs, they can't score runs.
And I think back to Corbin Burnes for one quick sec.
Sure.
I think for fans to try to temper their expectations of this is that it's not like Corbin Burnes had a particular affiliation to Baltimore. This was not the organization he was raised in. He was not drafted by this team. He was here for one season. His family lives across the country in Arizona. So I would imagine that Arizona spring training is probably one of his priorities going into this offseason, which the Orioles are not. And I would also imagine if he were to consider the Orioles, he would want to know what their plan is. He would want to know, are you going to bring in somebody who's going to help this offense moving forward? I think that he would need to see that before he would even consider coming back to Baltimore.
Yeah, a lot has to
Mhm.
be, there you have to make a very, very strong pitch to Corbin Burnes. Simply playing in Baltimore in one season is not enough of an incentive for him to be back. All accounts, he enjoyed his time in Baltimore. He loved the clubhouse. He loved getting to know these young guys and helping this young pitching staff. But he's a free agent, and free agents are willing to go out and explore the market. So let's go to game two because the Orioles trade deadline acquisition, Zach Eflin started that game. And you mentioned it. Brandon Hyde was incredibly aggressive in how he utilized his bullpen in this game. Eflin threw just 75 pitches, gave up a run in the first inning, but otherwise was dominant. And that is exactly who Zach Eflin was for the Orioles in the second half of the season with the 2.60 ERA and 9 starts.
I mean, Eflin did his job today. Was not his sharpest start. He did. His pitch count was really high, really early. I think he definitely had one more inning in him. He should have gone into the fifth, in my opinion, but it ended up being fine. It ended up really not mattering how early he was taken out. Hyde was ultra aggressive, but you knew Hyde was going to be like that. You know, he said going into the series that this was how he was going to manage. He had Cade Povich and Dean Kramer in the bullpen, as needed if it went to Estra, so that he wasn't afraid to, use those guys because, I mean, there's no tomorrow, so they had to do everything they had to do.
Yeah, and for the most part, it worked out. I mean, your bullpen gave up just one run combined.
Yeah.
So he was somehow able to piece together this game after
Mhm.
pulling Zach Eflin as early as he did. And frankly, if your offense
Yeah.
scores more than one run, this isn't an issue. I mean, it's
Right.
hard for you to place any blame on how this game was managed from a pitching staff standpoint
Mm.
because 2 runs against a Kansas City Royals team that has one of the best hitters in baseball and Bobby Witt Jr. and overall a pretty solid lineup is frankly should be enough to get the win.
Yeah.
But the only run that they got in this game came from a Cedric Mullins solo home run. He was really the only one in this entire series
Mm.
that came up big for the Orioles offense.
Mm.
You saw a bases loaded, no out opportunity for this team with the heart of the order up in the middle of the game, 6th inning after Cedric Mullins hits that solo homer, a bottom of the 5th, I should say. Santander pops up. Colton Cowser strikes out and ends up breaking his hand on the strikeout after he was hit by that pitch. And then Adley Rutschman grounds out to end the threat. That leaves the game tied at 1. And then the Royals take the lead and they never relinquish it. And they go on to win 2-1.
That moment with the bases loaded, that when that inning ended, I said, that's the season right there. I didn't see any way for them to come back to it. And they had some opportunities, later in the game, but they were never going to have an opportunity like that again. You just kind of saw the look on their faces when that happened, when the 5th ended, and they just looked defeated. And then you see Gunnar in the 7th, swinging at a pitch way outside the zone. I was like, that is a desperation swing right there. They're getting desperate now. They're not playing good baseball anymore. They don't really been playing good baseball all series besides that 5th inning. But that was the moment where I was like, there's no coming back from that for this team.
And it was a deflating moment for the fans as well. You could feel a lot of energy leaving the ballpark. As
Yeah.
the second Cedric Mullins hit that ball, that was the loudest the crowd had been all game,
Mhm.
really probably
All
all series.
serious. Yeah.
And from there, it just built as the Orioles put runners on first and third, and then they load the
Mhm.
bases, and they're not able to cash in a single run on that. I mean, it was just poor
Yeah.
situational hitting, and for a team that not only doesn't win when they don't hit one home run, they don't win when they hit any home runs. They simply need the long ball to score runs, and
Yeah.
they got none of it. They got one Cedric Mullins homer, and that was their only run all series.
And I mean, literally, they just need to score 2 runs to tie it up. It was not a big ask for one more run. They were never down by more than 1 run all series. And what you saw from the Kansas City team that you didn't see from Orioles is that Kansas City was just putting the ball in play. They were just playing simple baseball. I kept saying, they kept putting the ball where the Orioles defenders weren't. Baseball 101, just get on base. The
Yep.
Orioles were not doing that. They were pulling. They were always going for the homer, as we saw a lot in the second half. They were striking out. They were swinging at first pitches a lot. They were very predictable. So I'm not surprised that the Orioles pitchers were able to take advantage of them like that.
No, the Orioles finished middle of the pack in baseball in the regular season in walks, and they frankly did not get on base and walk enough in
Yeah.
this series as well. And your best hitters in the lineup did not deliver. That's really
Mhm.
what it came down to. I mean, Gunnar Henderson 0 for 7 in 2 games. Jordan Westberg 1 for 6. Probably not 100% health wise, and I'm sure he was feeling it in this series. Colton Cowser 1 for 7 in this series, and ultimately had to be lifted because he broke his hand, striking out in that at bat. Adley Rutschman 1 for 8. If your good hitters, if your best hitters are not hitting well, what else can you do? I mean, and it's hard to pin exactly put a pin in it, what the problem was. I know that we're going to hear a lot during the offseason about the jobs of Orioles co-hitting coaches Mac Borcholti and Ryan Fuller. Um, it's tough to explain how all of these guys went cold at the worst possible time in the season. You could say perhaps all these guys were young. They are still early in their careers and they have a lot of baseball left and they have a lot to learn. But it's incredibly frustrating that all of the guys that you have in your lineup consistently to deliver do not do so in the most critical portion of the season.
Yeah, and legacies are built in October. And you can say that they're young and that they're not building their legacy yet, but Bobby Witt Jr. is. He's not same age as some of these guys, drafted in that
Drafted in the
2019
yeah,
draft. Yeah, with Adley and Gunnar, same experience level. He pulled through in those moments. Adley did not. Gunnar did not. Santander, who is way more experienced than all of them, did not. Um, so I don't know what the problem is. I've asked many times. I've asked different ways. I've gotten a different answer every time. I think the fact of it is they either need to go out and invest this offseason in a veteran bat who has a proven postseason record, or they need to make some coaching changes. Maybe it's both. But I think that you're at the point now where you can't just trust that these homegrown guys they got you to the postseason. You need something else to help them win in the postseason.
yeah, you need to get over the top. It's not
Mhm.
enough, again, to have them learn from this experience, and you hope that they
Yeah.
do. But they had last sweep at
Mhm.
the hands of the Rangers, last
Mhm.
playoffs to learn from that
Mhm.
experience, and they weren't able to carry anything over that from that to now. And I know there's been a lot of kind of revisionist history about the deadline and thinking that the Orioles
Mhm.
perhaps didn't do enough at the deadline. The guy that started this game and was excellent in game two was Zach Eflin. He was acquired at the deadline. And I would love to go back and try to find anybody that was saying at the deadline in the month of July that the Orioles needed more offense. I mean, perhaps
Yeah.
they needed one more bench player, but they traded Austin Hayes, sure. But that was one of the best hitting teams in all of baseball for the first half of the season. And the only subtraction that you had via trade was Austin Hayes. You hit a rash of injuries. Jordan Westbrook goes down a few days after the trade deadline. You do trade Connor Norby, sure, in the deal that gets you Trevor Rogers, who's not able to give you anything in the second half. But this was an offense that was humming in the first half of the
Mhm.
season. And so to say that the Orioles really needed to add bats at the deadline doesn't really jive with how the season unfolded. All of the talk in the first half of the season was this team just needs arms and they'll be good. They
Mhm.
just need to make up for the loss of John Means and Tyler Wells and Kyle Bradish, and they'll be fine. This offense should be able to hit. And whatever it was the loss of Jordan Westbrook, it was the loss of Connor Norby or Austin Hayes, or just everybody losing confidence at once. This entire offense went asleep from mid August on. This was a trend. It wasn't just 2 games that the Royals caught them for. This was a trend for the second half of the season. The Orioles bats were not good enough. And they have a long offseason to try to figure out what went wrong with their best hitters.
Mhm. And I think for most of the second half, they could use the excuse and you could rationale it by being, okay, they have so many injuries now to their offense. Westbrook's out, Mountcastle's out, Ramon was out, uh, Mateo is out. 3 or 4 of those guys were back for the playoffs. So even if they weren't 100%, that you can't use that theory anymore. They were
Yeah.
back, they were in the lineup, and they weren't even really the guys who weren't performing. If we're being real, it was the guys who were healthy all season and playing every day.
Yeah. And like you said, they need to find some way to inject something into their offense to figure this out in the offseason, whether it's bringing back Anthony Santander, although he's going to command quite a lot of money in free agency, or signing a veteran to a multi-year deal to try to add some more offense in the middle of your lineup. But ultimately, one guy from the outside is not going to be the difference. You cannot survive a playoff series where Henderson goes 0 for 7, where Rutschman goes 1 for 8, where Westberg goes 1 for 6, where Kauser goes 1 for 7. Those guys are going to be in the lineup next time this team is in the playoffs. And so those guys have to deliver as well. It can't just be you're going to fix this via trade or via free agent in the offseason. You need to look internally and say, what went wrong with our best hitters and how can we fix it now?
Yeah. And like I said, maybe they do need to make a coaching change. Maybe a veteran will kind of inject that confidence into the clubhouse and help them out that way. But you can't just wait until next playoffs and just expect them to be, okay, they had bad playoffs, they're learn from it. They need to do something this offseason to fix this.
Yeah, and you can't delude yourself and just say it was 2 bad games, because it was a bad month and a half of the regular
Yeah.
season that led to this happening in the playoffs. I think last year we saw the Orioles play much worse baseball in those 3 games against Texas. They played outside of themselves in the month of October in those 3 games than they did all season, where they didn't get swept all season. This was a trend. This was more of the same in those 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all expected this.
Yeah.
I mean, last week they looked better, but they were playing the Twins, who had kind of already fallen out of the playoff picture and didn't have anything left to play for. And then they played the Yankees, who they always play well against, or at least in the past 2 years. So that one doesn't really surprise me that much either. But you can't say we didn't see this coming when everybody saw it coming. This is what the whole second half was like for this team. And even dating back to the beginning of July before the All-Star break, they were playing like this too in that Yankee series way before the break as well.
Yeah, and Cole Reagans, Michael Wacha, those are great pitchers, but you're going to see great pitchers in the month of October. And you could at least take some solace last year in the fact that the Texas Rangers went on to win the World Series. If the Kansas City Royals lose in the next round up at Yankee Stadium to the Yankees and help the Yankees advance to the ALCS, you're not going to have really much to fall back on other than you lost to a less talented team in 2 games and you looked bad doing it, unfortunately.
I said it earlier, but the Rangers beat the Orioles last year. It was clear the Rangers were better prepared for the playoffs. They were the better team in that moment. This year, the Orioles beat themselves. They could have won either of these games, and they just didn't. And that's on them. Orioles, yes, they have phenomenal pitching, but the Orioles were hitting them. So it's not like they weren't in any of these games.
No. If there is one perhaps way to look at this from a glass half full perspective, and I had a conversation with somebody walking into the ballpark today about maybe you need to take a step back to take 2 forward. I mean, progress is not linear, and all of these guys are young. They hopefully will learn from this and get better. I think you saw some big time leadership steps from guys like Jordan Westberg. I mean, it's hard to not be impressed with what he did when he was on the bench trying to get back, basically working as hard as he possibly could every single day to get back from a broken hand. And he was with them in the playoffs. You saw guys step up at critical moments, and you hope that they learn from this. Look back to the Orioles' recent history. They go to the playoffs in 2012. They take a step back in 2013, miss the postseason. They go to the ALCS the following year in 2014 and do get swept at the hands of the Royals, unfortunately. But you look at the Houston Astros, the organization that Mike Elias came from. In 2015, they make the ALDS, this young, exciting team. They miss the playoffs the following season. And then in 2017, they win the World Series. So perhaps that is the trajectory for this team. I'm interested to see what Mike Elias has to say as soon as he speaks with the media about what needs to be done with this team, because, the hope is you can't just take 2 steps forward by sitting back. You need to actively make some kind of changes.
I agree. And I very much look forward to asking him what he plans to do.
And I look forward to letting you go and get some sleep, because you're still at the ballpark, Danielle, at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday. Thank you so much to everybody for following along all season long. At @D_Allentuck is Danielle's Twitter handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Of course, read thebaltimorebanner.com, where you can read Danielle's work and Andy Koska's great work and Kyle Goon's great work and John Mioli's work. Subscribe $1 for 6 months. We are going to keep you up to date all off season long throughout the World Series. We're going to probably take maybe a couple more naps in the following month, but it's going to be a key critical offseason for the Orioles. Anthony Santander, Corbin Burnes, those guys are free agents. Could the Orioles re-sign either of them? Could they add anybody else? Could they make another splash trade and add to their rotation, perhaps? We will have you covered. For Danielle Allentuck, I'm Paul Mancano. Thanks for everybody for following our coverage all season long. We really, really, truly appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. Thanks so much for tuning in. Like, rate, review.